So you're scheduled to take on a mystery opponent in the first round of this Survivor Series tournament to crown a champion, and Vince McMahon does not fail you. He's looking out for you. The mystery opponent is Dwayne Gill. Of course, we're telling the story here that he's doing whatever he can to make sure that you become his corporate champion. The second round match is against Al Snow. He's going to steal Sacco from you.
There you go. Yeah. Okay.
The third round match is the one that maybe has been forgotten about, but it has one of the best stories ever. You're wrestling Stone Cold Steve Austin. You guys are going at it. The ref goes down. Austin hits the stunner. And here comes what we think is a babyface referee, Shane McMahon, sliding in. He counts to 2 and then gives Stone Cold the double bird. And this is where it gets interesting. Boss Man's supposed to be there for the finish, but he never shows up. Tell us about what's happening in that match.
Yeah, I think I said in Have a Nice Day that he reminded me of, I believe it was Blitzen, who was lost in a snowdrift and missed out on the Christmas Eve journey. In my favorite children's book of all time, The Happiest Christmas, which coincidentally enough, I just sent out today in the mail as one of Santa's official representatives. I sent it to one of my favorite singers, Margot Price, so that when her daughter opens it up, the storyline of this is that Santa presented this to Buddy Elf Christmas 1976. So there you go. I love that story, and that's what Boss Man reminded me of. In the same way that Blitzen was forlorn when he realized he missed out on Christmas, the Boss Man just forgot his cue, which resulted in Briscoe using one of the worst chair shots in history. But in his defense, Steve had the bad neck.
Yes.
And because it wasn't in the cards, he was using one of those folded up cushion chairs with the hinges. It's one of those worst case scenarios. Yeah. Well, it wasn't folded up. Let me tell you.
But it is a love tap. I think Bruce Pritchard has called this the Tink heard round the world.
Yeah, and now the reason I'm not wearing my tuxedo pants there is they literally ripped in half. Not planned, but I did have the wherewithal to plan for a worst case scenario, and I put the brown tights under there because trust me, like when Ric Flair gets stripped down to his BVDs, it's funny. It wouldn't have been funny if I got stripped down and revealed that I was growing a cottage cheese factory underneath my my tuxedo pants. So I'm lucky that I did plan for the worst. And look, it wasn't a great win over Steve Austin, but any win over Steve Austin's a pretty good win.
I would agree with that. So as we said, you get the win there. You're going to move on to the finals to take on The Rock after he defeated The Undertaker. So think about that in the semifinals here. It's Mankind versus Austin, Rock versus Undertaker. And you wrote in your book that you were physically and mentally exhausted, but now it's time for the main event. I think you actually hurt your knee attempting to dive on The Rock on the Spanish announce table. What do you remember about that main event match here? I mean, this is such an incredible show, an incredible story. And the big callback to the prior year at Survivor Series, and they've screwed you. So the people's champ, because people are in love with the people's elbow and he's the baby face and you're trying to warm up to the evil Vince McMahon. They screw you in the process. They crown him as the new corporate champion. What'd you think of the story, the match, the performance, and how were you physically after the show?
Well, yeah, I'd forgotten that I was banged up, but you say I said I was, I believe what I said. Yeah, that elbow, it definitely has some ramifications. I think the only thing I was worried about is whether they would accept a double turn because The Rock was so incredibly popular. And this guy had just come on. I mean, I don't know if anyone's ever, him and Steve maybe with parallel like trajectories. They almost like straight into the air, and it wasn't like a linear chart. I mean, these guys just took off like rockets. So I think that was my one concern, was whether people were going to accept me as the good guy, even though they were leaning in that direction. WWE had done a great job of setting that table. But if it had been anybody, if he had turned without Mr. McMahon, I'm not sure it would have worked as well. but it definitely did work. And then we were off to the races with matches in, the December pay-per-view, January pay-per-view, February pay-per-view, and a handful of TV matches in there. Coming up on the 25th anniversary of the I Quit match, which was, memorable, not really pleasant, but really memorable. And so it did work. It really did. And, in a business where it's both a sprint and a marathon, it was a really good, career move for both me and Dwayne Johnson.
Super fun to think about that fun night, the people's eyebrow events. And then that's when we know, wait a minute, and he's crowned the champion, but it is the 1 year anniversary of the actual Montreal Screwjob at Survivor Series. And I know you felt so strongly about that. We've covered that in the archives. Were you at all hesitant to sort of lean into that story for this show, or by that point, were you comfortable with it?
I think I was comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I was. I'd like to be able to say I wasn't, but I think I was. Brett had landed on his feet.
Oh yeah.
It was, Brett had landed on his feet and he was doing well. Really, Bret Hart, the best Bret Hart's the WWE Bret Hart.
I love Bret Hart too. She was a hell of a hand. The next night on Raw, the Stooges and the Corporation, they're on a quest to find you. It ends up with you beating up Pat Patterson, Gerald Briscoe, and Sergeant Slaughter down in the boiler room. When you're working in a program with the champion, fresh off of a couple of main events and a lot of screen time with Vince, in this era, you're still very much, how great is that? If you're watching along with us, you see they're wearing shoulder pads and Kentucky football helmets. Mr. Sergeant Slaughter's got his old gear on. It's quite a look. You've got to be feeling like in this era where you're still paid on the houses and things like that. Hey man, I'm in the main events. I'm working with the champ. Did you think, hey, maybe I'm going to be in next year's WrestleMania main event? Was that on your radar at this point, do you think?
No. The title win wasn't on my radar either.
Yeah.
I was happy. I like to be paid, no doubt about that. And you can ask JR about the number of times I did outright complain about payoffs. Sometimes they were, changed and sometimes they weren't. But in my heart, I didn't get into wrestling because I thought I'd make a lot of money. I got into it because I loved it. And I just loved that combination of physicality and theatrics. And I love doing good stuff. And I just felt like what we were doing. I even think in that in that segment where I fought off Briscoe and Patterson were the two main stooges. Like Sarge was one of the biggest stars in the industry. Sarge still does well at the Comic Cons.
Oh yeah.
Way. And Sarge was one of my people who cracked the door open for me to get into the business because I was able to give him MSG VHS videotapes at a time when very few people had those type of things. He even signed an autographed photo to my college girlfriend, take care of Mick and that's in order.
Wow.
And here I'm just, this is, I guess, it's granted it's 13 years, but it's still Sergeant Slaughter. And I remember quoting Bill Murray's character, John Winger from Stripes, where I said, I'd like to take a big swing at you, Sarge. While I'm dueling the, and Pat, for people who don't know, Pat Patterson was one of the all-time great workers, just like an incredible wrestler. And I'm having a chance, and Briscoe and the Briscoe brothers, these guys are legends, and I'm holding my own in a 3-on-1 with them, and getting to share the screen with those guys, which I really loved, well into my WWF commissioner days.